My name is Jana Pariser. I'm a senior customer success specialist with the customer engagement team at the American Psychological Association. My colleague Dawn is also on the call, so if anybody has any questions, you can just drop them in the chat. And Dawn will grab my attention, let me know, and we can kind of discuss those questions as we're going through. But feel free to ask questions. Those are great because I think it's very timely for us to address those while we're going through the content. The other thing I wanted to make sure I mentioned as we go through this is while I can highlight some of the APA style guidelines, I want to reiterate, I am not a style expert. I know the style experts, but I am not one of them. So I may or may not be able to answer any style questions, but I can walk you through how academic writer can help you. And within this, we're going to talk about what it means to present data in academic writer. So mainly focusing on tables and figures, a brief call out to what a footnote might be, and a brief call out to what an appendix might mean for you. So I'm going to start the slideshow and just do a quick overview of what we're going to review. So the American Psychological Association's the publication manual. It's broken into 12 sections. So it's meant to guide you through the act of scholarly writing. And I think the core of APA style focuses on effective communication. So you can present your information in a clear, concise, and organized way so that readers can focus on your ideas without being distracted by like a formatting issue, or maybe they want to go back and review the work quickly. They can find key points, findings, sources, all the good stuff from your writing. So that's what the APA style is meant to do. The 7th edition is the first edition that really starts taking into consideration some of the guidance for students, mainly focused on student papers like the annotated bibliography or response paper, etc. But we are specifically focusing on section 7, tables and figures. A few things to keep in mind while you're thinking about whether or not you should use a table of figure in your paper is how it will enhance your research. How will this effectively communicate the data that you want for your reader? So that's one of the main things to keep in mind. I did want to point out that in the manual itself, there are some really handy checklists that you can refer to kind of help you design your table or a figure and make sure you're using it effectively. I put those in here, and I'm going to have a PDF of this presentation so that way you will have access to it. But on page 207, there's a tables review checklist. And on page 232, there's a figures review checklist. And it really helps walk you through, is this right? Am I doing this right? Is this necessary? And then always consider who your reader is in the submission requirements for what you're writing when deciding where you want to put your table or figure. Does it make sense to embed it in the body of the paper? Does it make sense to just call it out and keep them at the back of your paper? I think you should really consider who your reader is. Are there any requirements of where to place this? And then commit. It's either you embed them all or you call them all out and place them at the back of your paper, but you don't really want to mix them up together. I did throw in some additional resources that I thought would be really handy here. The APA style blog is great, it has tons of extra information. The style team has a help page where you can email the style experts if you have a very specific question. And then for academic writer, we do have a YouTube channel where I'm going to place the recording of this session. And we also have our APA Publishing Learning Commons, and that's linked on every page in Academic Writer. So let's check out Academic Writer. Let's dive in. You should still be seeing my screen. So Academic Writer, let me log back in. I'm going to quickly point out where you can find information in the Learning Center as a quick reference for tables and figures while you're working in the product. It's not as comprehensive, so I do have some additional content pulled up. But in the Learning Center, you can quickly, I recommend, if you want to try to decide what type of table or figure you're going to use, is to immediately go to the sample tables or the sample figures. These have a great synopsis of the types of information for each type of table. And when you click on it, it can demonstrate the formatting for you. It's a great, easy way to kind of take a look at the type of table that you might be using. And the same for a figure. And I like looking at it in the grid view. I don't know if you noticed that I toggled over to grid view. It's just a little bit more colorful, and I like to be able to see them as I'm reading about them. You can also browse. Some people like to browse content. We have a whole section on tables and figures. This talks more about the elements of a table and then the guidelines for creating a table, less about like what type of table I should choose, you should choose for your paper. And the same for the figures. And then if you had questions about, like, say you wanted to know more about a footnote or appendice, you can do a quick search. So here you do a quick search for footnote. It'll bring up the quick guide, and it will also pull up a couple of sample papers, which is another great way to see those in action so that you can kind of figure out exactly what type of information would go into one of these. So I always recommend looking at the samples. Those can be very helpful. I did move the microphone a little bit closer, so hopefully it's a little bit easier to hear. Sorry about that. Now we're going to toggle over to the Writing Center. We're not going to spend too much time here. Let's jump into how do I get my table or figure into Academic Writer. So I'm going to go to my papers. I could easily just use the file cabinet up here and toggle directly to my list of papers. So within this, my very messy demo paper, we're just going to go down the line. We're going to start with tables and move over to figures, and then just a brief mention of how to add in a footnote or appendice. So first, let's manage our tables. You can click on the tab on the left-hand side over here, and then this will give you a view of your paper table list, as well as any table you've ever added to Academic Writer. So similar to references, when you add a reference, we have a whole tab for those. You have a reference library where we store everything, every reference you've added to Academic Writer. So for tables and figures, your library of tables or figures that you've added to Academic Writer are going to be nested in every paper that you have in Academic Writer. So any paper you open up will have tables and figures, and you'll be able to access your library of tables and figures. So you can see here, I have a ton in here. These are some old imports that I've done. But let's talk a little bit about how to get a table or a figure into Academic Writer. So I'm going to add a new table. I can immediately create a table, or I can import a table from Word. I know it would be great if you could import it directly from Excel, but one of the problems with importing from Excel is that there's no definition to the table. When Academic Writer would look at this, it's an infinite table. So we need something a little bit more defined to be able to import. So when you import, you can only import from Word. You can also choose to create a table. As in all cases in Academic Writer, if you're creating something, you immediately have to title it. It's a working title, just like anything else. But I'm going to show you really quickly how to recreate a table. So I pulled up a sample table here. This one's pretty small, so I can just copy this and drop it in my title. If I wanted to create my table here, so I did look at this, it's an 8-column by 5-row table. I can just build that in really quick. And it's counting it for me, which is kind of great. I don't have to count the little squares as I'm going over. It's just telling me at the bottom, 8 by 5. Perfect. Thank you, Academic Writer. I appreciate that. I can quickly kind of merge things to make this look better. So I need this to be merged. I'm going to expand my toolbar here so I can look at everything. I'm just going to merge. I can also add in a border if I need a bottom border or if I want to get rid of it. And then I can start filling in, populating my table, formatting it. It's not the most robust toolbar that you've ever seen. So my recommendation would probably be for something small like this table here, I would be fine making that in Academic Writer, no problem. I could bring over my note for this. The notes are going to be where you explain what you're talking about. So you can see in this note, it's defining what end means here, what am I looking at in the tables. So that's what you're going to place in your notes. And then your specific note would be a subscript of some type. So a quick view here, this little A, this is your more specific note. So that's what you would put in this field. And then if you have a probability note to go along with that, you can tick any of these boxes that go along. I have no idea what they mean, so please, I hope you don't have a question about any of the probability. I can't answer that. And then if you have your own probability note, you can drop that in here. And then you would just hit save. It's not great. I can always go back in and edit it and add in all the data, but here is a table. Now let's import a table. Let's see what that looks like. So what I've done is I've recreated this table here in Excel. It was a little bit bigger. I wanted a little bit more space to kind of look at it while I was recreating it. Just a little bit more functionality. But like I said, you can't import from Excel because there's just no definition of your table. So I copied it into Word. I did a paste with formatting. So I have it here. Before I import, I'm just going to shut that. Academic Writer is not going to let you import something if it's open. I've made that mistake a few times while working on this presentation, which is fine. I learned the hard way. So it's my sample tables document, and it's just going to start pulling out all the tables within that document. I can choose all of them, or I can just pick the one that I want to work with, which is this one, and begin import. So now that it's in my paper table list, oh, this is great. this immediately opens up to remind me that there is going to be content that is not going to follow that import. So I'm literally only importing the table itself. I'm not bringing in any additional information like the title or any notes, etc. So it's immediately telling me, look for that exclamation point and verify your information. So when I click on this, I have to put in my title. Do I have a note? Do I have a specific note? I can start dropping all of those in. And I'm just going to grab them really quick from here so we can see what it looks like all put together. And then I'm going to pull in my note from here and drop that down here. And then just in case, I'm going to click the button here to make sure it's formatted in title case. And then I'm going to grab my specific note and put that down here. And then I'm going to hit update. So now my table is fine. I no longer have the red exclamation point to let me know that I have a missing element. And I now have my table added to Academic Writer. But now I want to put it in my paper. So I've added it. I have it on my paper table list. It's been added to my library of tables. I want to put it in my paper. So I can close and return to body, or I can just click on the body of my paper. And then to add a table, I'm going to put it here. And I'm going to embed it. Underneath your paper editor, we have the site references. So if you're familiar with Academic Writer and adding references using this functionality, we're just going to toggle over to the Tables tab. I have a list of tables. I'm going to select this one. And if I want to embed it in the paper, I'm going to click this button, embed in paper, or I can call out my table and it will automatically add it to the end of the paper for me. Let's just embed it and see what it looks like. It's parenthetical. If you don't understand what they're talking about, you can just click on the question mark here, and it's going to give you an example of what it looks like if it's a narrative or a parenthetical. So we're trying to help you as much as possible along the way. So when I hit submit, there's my call out and there's my embedded paper and my notes. Perfect. I think it looks pretty good. Say I decided that was not the correct place and I was like, you know what, I really need to start earlier with that table. I want to put it up here. I'm just going to put it where it goes. And I'm going to tick the box and I'm going to embed in paper. It's not going to embed it again. It's just going to change the numbers of the callouts. So here, table 1, it's still going to put it after the paragraph, but now I have an extra callout. And if I decide that I want to delete it and put it at the back of the table, I'm just going to delete my callouts here. And then I can just add it again. So I'm just going to put my callout in the right spot. You always want to make sure you know the right spot to put it in. So the callout, if it's parenthetical, is probably going to go at the end of the sentence. If you're integrating it into your narrative, just like the example says, right here, it would look as a reference within the sentence. So here, I'm just going to hit OK and submit. And now I have the table call out and it embedded it. Did I hit embed or call out? I'm pretty sure Academic Writer is looking at it because I've already try to embed it. Well, that defeated the demonstration there, but it still looks really good. Let's try this one more time. Success. I've deleted it. It's disappeared. I'm going to add in a different table. And I'm going to put it right here. And then I'm going to scroll down and we're going to put in this one. I'm going to call it out, parenthetical. So now I have a call out in the middle of my paper. I'm just going to format it so that it's in the right spot. Looks good. And then under preview, let's just check to make sure it went into the right spot. So here's my reference list, references, 16, and then my table should be right here, table 1. Great, I'm glad that worked. I was a little nervous. Academic Writer was going to give me a hard time for a second, but I'm really glad that worked. So inserting a table. I know it's going to be tempting to try to copy and paste a table into your paper. Please don't do that. If you paste formatted content into Academic Writer, it's going to get a little cranky, just as if you pasted a formatted content into Word or Google Docs. They just get a little cranky and they might move it into a spot where it doesn't belong. So when you export it and print it out, it's just not going to look right. And we don't want you to get dinged on your paper because your table is in the wrong spot. So, and you can't take advantage of some of the features of Academic Writer by pasting it in. So it may take a few extra minutes to kind of import or build a table into Academic Writer, but it's definitely worth it. Any questions on tables? So an extra space. You should just be able to delete any additional extra space. For figures, let's play around with figures, Robin. I'm curious to see what this looks like. So if there aren't any questions about tables, but feel free to ask them. No problem if something pops into your head. We can always go back and take a look at them. But let's take a look at our figures. So in the same way that tables are how you have a little list of your figures and tables, I have my figures here. These are all the figures that I've ever added to Academic Writer. I do like cats, but I also borrowed a file from a friend of mine here at APA, and they had a lot of cats. So I have a lot of cats here. So I could choose to add any of these to my paper figure list. And so when I toggle over here, now I have cat food preferences. I can add a new figure. So good thing here is you can import figures from Word or Excel. So no pressure. You can just grab it from a Word file, or you can grab it from an Excel file, or you can just create a figure. And from here, again, you can import from a Word or Excel file, or you can use an actual image. So I'm gonna pick an image. Let's see, Academic Writer. I'm gonna name it Academic Writer sticker. Make sure it's formatted in title case, just in case I forgot. And then if I have a figure note, which I don't, but again, when you click into the box, Academic Writer is going to give you some information about it. So just to clarify, and if you are just thinking what kind of note would go along with figures, I did pull this up here. as a demonstration. So like within this one, what are we looking at? Framing scores for different reward sizes. This is just kind of explaining what you're looking at in the image. So the note would always be something to help contextualize the image. If it's the key that you're looking at for your graph, whatever you need, the note will help enhance your understanding of the image. So I don't have one. I think it's self-explanatory. I'm just going to hit save. And now I have this figure. I can also import. So let's take a look at what that looks like. I'm going to select a document. So here I have my copy of figures for import. That was a great pause for me to take a sip of water, but now we're just waiting for it to load. I have a lot of images in this file. I probably should have pared it down a little bit. Some of these might be familiar. This is the cat file. So I'm just going to select one that I don't think I imported last time. Let's just grab a couple of these and begin import. So again, it's flagging it because when I import it, I can only import the figure. I'm not importing any title or additional information that goes along with it. So I'm just going to X out of that part. And now I have a couple of additional tables. So if I wanted to, I would just edit it. And we're really just importing the image and placing it in that form as if I was creating it. So this is, looks like types of cats. Make sure, okay. And then I'm not going to include a note here and I'm going to hit update. And now that I've hit update, I do not need to edit it. It's filtering it by missing elements. So these additional images need a title. We're going to ignore those. I'm going to add my types of cats. Oh, it's in my paper figure list. Perfect. That's exactly where I wanted it to go. If I wanted to remove it, I could just hit the button. So let's go look at our paper and add a figure to our paper. So in the same as tables, you're going to call out figures below the paper editor. So I'm just going to move on to the next tab here. I have a couple of figures. Let's grab my sticker. I'm going to, I know my last example, I have it called out and added to the back of my paper, and I'm going to act inconsistently and add this as an embed in paper. Let's take a look. So again, parenthetical or narrative. This is going to be parenthetical. So now my figure 1 is here. It's gigantic. And then 2, you cannot get rid of that extra space. You can only get rid of, oh, I think putting the cursor here and hitting delete allowed me to get rid of a little bit of the space, but let's see what it looks like under preview. Okay, let's toggle over to my page. Here we go. So this is at the beginning of a new page. So my previous page will have the figure information. I don't like the way that looks. Let's see, can we fix that? Perhaps we do, to keep it together, I'm gonna add that enter here just to kind of make sure it's on the one page. Let's take a look again and make sure it looks good. And it still is trying to hide on my previous page. So that's another thing to consider when you're placing a figure is the size of it. Is it the correct size? Is it fitting on the page correctly? Is the information tied to it? So again, when you're thinking about how you're presenting the information, even in academic writer, you're going to have to make decisions about what is this going to look like? Is this where I need it? Do I want to have this called out or embedded? So maybe this is better if I call it out versus embedding it. So this will go away. And then we should be able to delete that. Where's my figure 1? Oh, academic writer. There you go. So if this is where it's going to go, let's see if we can just call it out. Maybe that's a little bit better. I'm going to call out parenthetical. Watch, it's probably going to give me a hard time and put it in the paper when I really just want to call it out. Thank you, academic writer. It's not like I'm trying to demonstrate to people how awesome you are. Let's put it in a different spot here. And let's add my other one and call it out as a parenthetical. Perfect. Thank you, academic writer. Thank you for pulling yourself together. Now let's take a look and make sure it went into the correct spot. At the back of my page, my table, and my figure. So now I'm not even worried about building my figure list or my reference list or my table list because academic writer is doing that for you. But one thing to consider is that as soon as I add a table or a figure to my list, I want to make sure that I'm calling them out. You don't want to leave them in there similar to a reference to then be added to your paper without being called out. So you can always match table callouts to your paper. So now I'm going to go to my paper and it's going to flag everything that I've added to the paper so that I can remove those from my paper list. Because I don't want to call them out if I'm not using them in the paper. I don't want to have them on the paper if I'm not going to use them. So again, you can also do that with your figures. So I'm going to match my figure callouts, run now. Oh, okay, let me go to my paper. Oh, here are my flags. I am not going to use these. So I'm going to remove them from the paper. So definitely once you've gone through the paper, you can add as many figures or tables as you want. Just remember to go back and run your check tools. Just, even though you're probably super organized and you have done and you've cited and called out everything, it can't hurt to just click the button to make sure that you didn't accidentally add something or forget to insert anything into your paper. So always run your check tools at the end of your paper before you export it. Does anybody have any questions about figures? Oh, good. I hope that it makes sense. And definitely, it's not something that's going to be perfect like anything else. You do need to play with it. You need to make sure things are in the correct spot. And even if you have to export the paper to review it after exporting, always check your paper. Just because in case something came out and it's just not quite in the right spot, you want to make sure that you've done your due diligence before submitting your paper. Just like when I added these in, I just immediately went to preview to double check to make sure it looks good. I did want to briefly mention footnotes and appendices. So footnotes, why would you need to use a footnote? I mean, that's a great question. In some cases, you can insert copyright information. In some cases, you might add an additional explanation about a test that you're referencing. A footnote should be used sparingly. You don't want it to distract from the content of your paper. And you want to make sure that the content of the footnote is enhancing what you're talking about. You don't want to add in extra content that doesn't need to be there. So if I did want to add a footnote to my paper, it's pretty easy. Footnotes go after the period. You can see this one right here. And you would just add in a footnote. Another example. And then you would create your footnote. If you are using something where you're explaining, maybe you're talking about an experiment and you have a quick footnote to say this experiment came from such and such, you can add in a citation to that within the footnote. But for this case, I just have a little blurb. I can create my footnote and it's going to drop it in the correct spot. Unlike figures and tables where you might reuse them from paper to paper, footnotes are specific to each paper. You will not have a library of footnotes in Academic Writer. So these will always be specific and you'll always have to build them. But again, footnotes are used sparingly and only meant to enhance what you're talking about in your paper. They should not be extensive. And appendices. Again, I had a really good example of why you would use an appendices. So here is my session that I took too long and got locked out of. But to go back to my list, this is an article talking about a test in processing of word production. So within this, they use a test of words and associations. But they're talking about the test in general, and it doesn't make sense to use the list of pictures and distractor words within the paper. It makes sense if somebody wants to look at it as a reference. So in this case, the author chose to put it as an appendix. So when I click on it here, it's literally a table of the pictures and distractor words that they used for this or that they discussed at some point in this article. So in the same way with Academic Writer, if you decide this table makes more sense as an appendix because I'm briefly discussing it, but it does not enhance the content of my paper enough to be a specific table called out or added to my table list, I'm going to put it in an appendix. So I'm going to add a new appendix. You're immediately going to decide if it's a table, figure, or a text. So if I want it to be a figure or a table, I have to first add that table or figure to my paper table list or my paper figure list. So here I don't have anything to select because I deleted everything. So let's go back really quick. We're going to add a table. From my tables, I'm going to add in this big guy here. I'm going to add to paper because I'm not calling it out or embedding it, but now it's in my paper table list and I can go and call it out in an appendix. So now I want to add it as a table. I'm going to select the table and then update. So now I have a paper appendix list. And again, an appendix similar to a footnote is not going to have a library of items for this because if it's a table or a figure, those items live in my library of tables and figures. And if it's text, that text is going to be unique to your paper. So you will create it here. So that's why you wouldn't have a library of appendices in your paper or in Academic Writer. So now when I look at preview, let's just take a peek and see what it looks like. So table 1, 17, I did not do something. Hold on. Let's go back and make sure my appendix needs to be called out. Otherwise, it's not going to be referenced in the paper. I almost forgot that crucial step. I'm so sorry, you guys. Let's pick a new spot. Let's put it here. Again, as a call out, it's going to be similar to the tables and figures added in the parentheses if we're adding it in parenthetical. So let's just hit submit. Creating appendix callouts. Perfect. Now let's go take a look and see what it looks like. I like to over check things as I go through because I guarantee you I'll miss something. So I like to make sure I'm doing my due diligence and always looking to see what it looks like. So if I did add in a second appendix, I would have Appendix 1 and Appendix 2. Academic Writer is going to take care of all of that for me. I don't have to worry about it. And then with the check tools, I can make sure I'm matching my appendix callouts. So if I had added an appendix and I didn't call it out, it would flag it for me. And then I can export my paper. Let's just take a look and see how it looks. So I'm downloading it as a Word document. Let's take a look at it. So here is my paper full of all my good stuff, all my messy demo paper. And then when I get to the back, here's my table 1, here's my figure 1, and my appendix. Does anybody have any questions? And it doesn't have to be about tables or figures. You can ask any type of question. I hope that I went through this slowly enough and kind of walked through everything so that you can duplicate the process when working with students or if you're writing your own paper. We're here to help. So when you're within the platform, you can scroll to the bottom of the page and click on Cite Help. You can also access this from here as well. And this opens up the Publishing Learning Commons. So if something does happen and you feel like your figure is just being cranky, and it's some type of technical error, you can contact our support team here and fill out a ticket, and they'll get back to you as quickly as possible. You could also just type in like tables. Really need to know more about tables here. So we have several articles on how to add tables. But yeah, that is presenting data in Academic Writer, kind of walking you through how to add tables and figures to your paper, how to check them, whether you want to call them out or embed them, and then a brief honorable mention for a footnote, and then how you're going to add those table or figures to your appendices. This is all the stuff that we don't usually have time for in our general webinars. So we like to have at least one session while you're working on it. Thanks, Heidi. I know it's difficult. I mean, things are going to go into your paper and you may not like the way it looks. And I mean, that happens to me in Word all the time. I just can't even tell you how frustrating it is. So just take it out and start over and make sure if it's really, really not working, then you can always contact us and we can help with that. But yeah, I mean, just like any other type of writing word processor, you're going to have to play around with it to make sure things work correctly. One thing I discovered today while preparing for this is that you can collapse the main menu. It's sort of like the focus mode, but it just gives you a little bit more space. And I really love the way it looks for writing. When I write, I need a little bit more space. So if, like me, you never noticed that was an option, that's an option. I'm going to stop share. Like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'm going to be posting the recording of this webinar to our YouTube channel. It should be available by next week. So if you have any students or if you want to go back and take a look at it, feel free, but definitely play around with it. If you're embedding it or calling out a figure or a table and it just doesn't look right to you, delete it, start over. But please don't copy and paste. I feel like that's going to give you problems. But we're happy to help with any of it. I hope this was a good overview.
Hi everyone, I wanted to do a quick update to our webinar presenting data in Academic Writer. I don't know if you noticed, but we did have a little bit of an error when changing our mind about embedding a table in Academic Writer. And I just wanted to make sure that if someone was going through this, they would be able to correct that error. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to embed a table just at random. So here I'm just going to submit it as a parenthetical, and now I've embedded the table. Say I changed my mind though. I don't want to have this embedded. I think it's going to make more sense called out at the end of the paper. I want to delete it first from the paper by taking away that call out, and then Academic Writer will remove the table. However, if I were to then go ahead and try to put this back in, I've lost my cursor, of course. Let's put it right here. Say I wanted to put it back in, but I've decided to just call it out. You may have noticed that Academic Writer will still embed that table. And that's not what we want to have happen. That's not necessarily where it should go. So let's go ahead and delete this again. And what you need to do, if you changed your mind, you're like, this needs to be called out, you can remove this completely from the paper. So once it's been removed from the paper, you can then decide, okay, let me go ahead and call this out. So I'm going to put my cursor in again. I'm going to select that table. This is the one I was using, and I'm going to select call out. So now, again, parenthetical, since I've removed it from the table, I now have a call out, and my table is listed here. It's called out, and then when I look at the preview for my paper, this will be located at the end of the paper. So let's just go ahead and double check. Academic Writer's thinking. We're going to navigate to page 16. So table 1, figure 1. So again, should you decide that you want to change your mind from embedding a table or a figure, either one, from your paper, and you want to call it out instead because that makes more sense for your paper, you will need to remove it completely from the paper. So you'll delete the call out and you will delete it from the paper. And that will remove that stickiness from Academic Writer and allow you to change your mind from embedding a table or a figure to calling it out. I hope this helps.